great demos for you today. We know the past couple of times we've done a lot of Q&A, so this time we're going to have 3 cool demos for you. First, Azure Functions proxies, then the new Functions Create experience, and then finally Functions on IoT Edge. I have with me Hamid and Byron, and we are going to get started.
All right, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Hamid Safi, and I'm a software engineer with the Azure Functions team, and I work mostly on proxies. So today I'm going to show some proxy demos. As you probably know, we GA'd proxies like several weeks ago. So I'm gonna show you some of the cool features that we have added in proxies. All right, so I have my function app created, this webcast. And for the very first thing, I'm just gonna go and create a simple proxy. I just go to the function portal and click add. And I name my proxy, like my header, it could be anything. And the route template, let's just call it headers. And let's just go to the like http.org/headers. And basically what it does is shows all the headers that we send to the backend. So let's just keep it simple and create. So this is my the URL for my. So this is my function app name, azurewebsite.net/headers, and then we forward the request to the backend. So let's just run it. There you go. So basically, it just dumps all the headers that we send to the backend. So this is the simplest form of proxy that you can use. Now I'm going to add so in the portal, we have these request overrides and response overrides. In the request override, we could just add a query string, header, change the HTTP method before sending the request to the backend. So for this demo, I'm just going to add a header for my request before sending the request to the backend. So let's call it test and value of 1. So the way it's going to work is that when the proxy gets the request, before sending it to the backend, it will add this header to the HTTP request and then send it to the backend. So let's now run the same thing, and our header is here.
We're experiencing technical difficulties where we're not seeing the screen at the moment. So I can see it on mine, but it's not getting broadcast at the moment.
Okay, it was.
Bummer.
Yeah. Sorry to everybody. We're running with the second string of the pit crew right now, running behind the camera.
Do I need to share anything?
Can you try sharing your screen and do the share with everyone thing? Here, let me.
It's a good thing that we're better at running a service than running a video crew.
Yeah.
True.
Well, it says Google Hangouts is sharing your screen. Is it tunneling?
So yes. Oh boy.
Woo! That's a trip. Yeah, can you see?
So the problem is when it's trying to load live.
Interesting. So it's getting to Google Hangout, just not.
It's getting to me.
It's getting to you.
Okay.
But it is not broadcasting.
Interesting.
So, please.
All right. So why don't you give a high-level overview of what we were trying to talk about?
Yeah. So basically, we are going to add headers and before sending the request to the backend and get the response. And if on the response back, we could just update the request or body or anything that we want. So basically, we work as a proxy in the middle, and we could do whatever we want with the proxy HTTP pipeline.
How are we doing on those technical difficulties?
We had a brief moment where we saw everything.
Ooh, promising.
Keep going. We got it.
Yep. So one of the things that we added for GA was from a proxy, you could always call a local function, which is in your function app. Before GA, you needed to put the entire URL of your of your function app and everything in the backend URL, and we were doing a DNS lookup, a round trip, going all the way to our front ends and back to the function. But we have optimized performance, and now we no longer need to do that. So in your backend, if you just put HTTP localhost, we find out that this is a local function, and we don't need to do all those extra round trip and everything. So
for paths that are within the function itself, can you do relative references? Or?
No, it still needs to be HTTP localhost, but you can just specify localhost. You don't need to put the entire DNS name.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it saves time on having to go to DNS and then resolve and then route through the public internet. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also, while we're stalling just a little bit, I realized I forgot to say my name. Hi everyone. I'm a PM on functions, and I will be talking to you about IoT Edge in a minute.
Cool. Do you want to switch over to my stuff and then see if we can come back to you at that point?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Hi everybody. I'm Byron Tardif. I'm a program manager with the Azure App Service and Azure Functions team. Part of what I do is I run the UI crews. So all of the UI that you see coming out for Azure App Service and Azure Functions is coming from the team that I'm working with. And today I'm here to talk to you about the new experience that we created for Function Create. And this is basically taking over the way that you create a function once you already have a function app. So let's see, are we at a point where we can see my screen?
We're trying.
Okay. So now I'll just talk to it. One of the things that we did is we got a lot of feedback about the fact that we had all of these templates that was basically just a sea of templates, and it was really hard to find what you were actually looking for. So we did a couple of things to improve that. One of them is templates are color-coded and icon-coded, which means that if you know, for example, that you're using an HTTP trigger, it should be easier to remember that those are the purple templates, and they have a relative icon that basically gives you a good idea of what the scenario is. The other thing that we did is we included the ability to search through templates. So this will search through the title as well as the description of the template. So it makes it very easy to find what you're looking for. Something that you can try is you can try to search, for example, queue. And you'll get back templates that include things like the queue trigger from an Azure queue, or a service bus queue trigger, or even IoT Hub templates that use service bus queues, SendGrid that uses a queue, and HTTP post with Azure Storage Queue. So all of those templates are cross-scenario because I'm looking at queue templates, I'm looking at SendGrid templates, stuff like that. But just because of the fact that they have the word queue in the description or the title, we can filter it down. The other thing that we did is we made it clearer to see what languages are supported by what template by bringing it right into the card that represents the template. So now you can see at a glance which languages are supported without having to go into the template itself. You can also filter by language. So if language is your number one priority, for example, I can go here and filter by C#, and then it will only show me the templates that support that. Or if I go to, for example, so you can see the actual filter, select Python. Python is one of the experimental languages that we have, and you can see that there's only 2 templates that support it. The other thing that you can do is you can filter by scenario, but the more powerful way of pivoting this view is through the search. Once you select a specific template, then we open the create experience on the right, and it's basically scoped down to just the parameters that you need to provide. This is a very simple one, the new HTTP trigger function, but we can look at a more complicated one that requires more parameters and more configuration. And basically, you can take it from there. The other thing to note is that this experience works both for the V1 runtime as well as the beta runtime, and the difference there is just different sets of templates, different sets of supported languages, but the create experience is pretty much the same. That wraps it up for me. Future stuff that we're working on is we now have the create experience improved. And the next thing that I want to look at is stuff that happens in the integrate tab and how to give you a similar experience to what you have in create, but on the integrate side of things.
Cool.
Yeah. Any questions from you guys? You guys have tried it out, right?
Yeah. It's awesome. It's significantly better than the cool experience.
Yeah, and feel free to leave a comment or reach out. We do have a user voice. Where people can leave comments or suggestions or feature requests. We're also active on Twitter, so send a tweet at Azure Functions, and that's stuff that we're looking at.
And in the off chance that nobody saw that, they would be able to see that in the live portal, correct?
Right. Yeah, this is live in production. It's been there for, I guess, a week or so, and it should be ready for anybody to try it out.
Go make a new function.
Yeah, go make a new function.
Should we bump back to proxies, or I can give a high-level explanation of IoT if we're still not seeing screen? No screen? Cool. Well, does that work with you too?
Yeah.
Great. So one thing that we released recently in Azure, well, I guess I'll take a step back. In this webcast, we do a lot of interesting explanations and demonstrations of really new functions features. What we don't highlight all the time is some other really cool services that Azure provides. So I'm going to take a moment and call out to IoT Hub, which is kind of your central location for anything IoT in the cloud. So it helps you manage devices. It helps you send device to cloud and cloud to device messages, and really helps you manage your IoT solution. So recently at Connect, I think that was a month ago now, something like that, we released the Azure IoT Edge. So the idea here is that instead of the old model of using like doing IoT work in the cloud, is you send messages up to the cloud, things are done, and then messages are sent back to the devices. Now, the IoT Edge is the idea that we're pushing that compute down from the cloud to those devices themselves. So rather than sending a message to the cloud, running a function on those devices, or running on those messages and sending the results back to the devices, we've released functions natively on IoT Edge. So you can write a module that runs actually on IoT devices and running your functions locally. And then before you even need to send the messages, you can do your functions logic. So a good example of when this might be necessary, let's say you have a factory of some sort. You're taking temperature readings. You're sending those devices up to the cloud, and you want to say, I'll run a function that tells whether the temperature is above a certain threshold. If that temperature is above a threshold, then I'll maybe send a notification to an administrator or someone to check on that. Maybe something's on fire. You want to put out all the fires. So before, you could do that by using functions on the IoT endpoint that we already have. What you could not do is actually run those functions on the devices themselves. So you would send millions of messages up to the cloud, run millions of things in the cloud, and then go down, send back to the administrator if necessary. And great, it looks like we have some visuals back. So I'm going to wrap up. The only paradigm shift here is that you can now run those functions on the devices. Oh, never mind, no more visuals. The idea is that instead of sending a million messages and then reacting to those messages in the cloud, you can actually run your functions on the devices so you don't have to send the messages in the first place. This is really cool because it adds to the list of places you can run a function. And to do this, we've containerized the functions runtime, which means you can really download it and play with it yourself. And it really lets you run a function anywhere.
So one of the benefits of this is that you call it on the latency of having to execute the function and be able to react to it, right? So you don't have to go round trip to the internet and come back.
Exactly. You don't have to go up, run stuff, and then go back down. You can just run it locally, and then you don't even have to send the message if you don't need to.
Right. And then if you have like a disconnected scenario where the internet goes out or something like that, you can still have some fail-safe logic that's running locally that will work regardless of the disasters, right?
Exactly. That's one of the entire one of the central advantages of the IoT Edge paradigm is that you can download your stuff when you have connectivity, but then if you have like local network outages, that's totally fine. Stuff still runs, and just works.
Yeah,
Right. Pretty cool.
cool.
We can currently see that screen.
Beautiful.
Right.
Let's bump back to
Cool.
proxies.
Yeah.
Azure Functions proxies. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go back to
Also,
proxies.
apologies to the crowd for the infinite recursion that I just subjected their screens to.
Yeah.
Gotta love Colin.
All right, so I have a HTTP trigger function. So let's just look at the code. It's a simple C# HTTP trigger. I just return a response, and in the meantime, I also add a header and I add the time. So I could always call this HTTP trigger directly, but let's say we want to call it from function and do some customization on the HTTP pipeline. So here is my endpoint, and you see I say /my HTTP. This is my route template, and the backend. Here I put localhost. So basically, we say that this is a local HTTP trigger, and then API HTTP trigger is /1. So let's just copy. And actually, I am going to open a new browser here and paste. It just says hello Azure, right? But what I'm doing here is in the response, I am adding a proxy. And I said the header proxy time. And here we have all these features that you can add, get something from the backend. So I'm saying backend. .response.headers.time. So it basically says the time header that I got it back from the backend, which was actually my function. So this is added here. So if I do F12 and refresh my function and go to the response header, we should see the proxy time that we added in the proxy. So this is another feature that you can always add request or response overrides. And the other feature I wanted to show was many times you want to use a third-party app or something. So I've created a proxy for address lookup. So basically, I said route template /address on my function app on the gets only, so I don't want to expose other methods. I want to call this backend URL. This is basically our Azure location-based services that we just announced a couple of weeks ago. So the way that we call these location-based services, you need to get a key, you need to get specify the version and everything. But I really don't want to expose those keys and everything to my users. So what I do is I create this proxy, and before calling the backend in my request overrides, I specify the API version and subscription key. And these two, if you have anything in your function app settings, you can always reference them with the percentage, your app setting name and percentage. So basically, I have already added these two app settings to my function app, and I'm just referencing them here. And you could do it this way, or also this backend requires a query, but I don't want to specify the query in here, so I just passing like request.query string the queue. So basically, this we go with /address with a queue query string, and then we do everything behind the scenes, and we call the backend. So let's just see how this works. I just copy this guy, go here, and I say queue equals, let's use the Microsoft address, one Microsoft way, Redmond, blah, blah, blah. And so this is my proxy. So you have no idea what's the backend, what backend I'm calling. And you can always change it. I'm using Azure location-based services. You could change it to Google, Amazon, or whatever you want. And then I just call the backend, I add all those overrides, and I get the results of the specific address, what's the longitude, latitude, and all the points of interest and everything. So you can basically play with all of these. So you don't need to expose the API key or anything. We just call one unified URL, and we do everything in the backend.
Any chance you could just pull that window down? It's currently getting blocked off the URL list. Sorry.
Okay. So
Yeah. That's really cool though, right? That means you can swap out the backend service without the user even knowing.
Yep, exactly. And your key and everything, you could just do however you want. So this is the UI that we have built for proxies. But if you really want to do advanced stuff, all the proxies, if you click on advanced later, you go to the proxies, the JSON file. So the proxies.json file is at the root of your function app, and you can always just manually update this guy or copy it from anywhere, and we can play with this. And basically, this is all we need. There's no other settings. So if you want to enable proxies for your function app, you just need to copy this file over and change it and do however you want. The good thing is you could create these proxies locally using function CLI. You could even run them locally and then just deploy them to Azure. And you could even change them here. And like, for example, I just do my header 1. And if I just do my AC3 header, what was it? Header 1, I should just get the thing. So it immediately takes effect. Yep, that's about it. So we are actively working on proxies. We will be enabling proxies on functions beta soon. So you could run proxies on any other environment other than Windows. And we'll be adding more features to be able to call proxies, functions for request override and response override if you want to do more advanced stuff. That's about it.
Awesome. Okay, so we're back to functions creates. And I mean, you get to it the same way that you get to the old creates. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen this. I'm going to go here into the custom function option. And here we can see the colorful new cards and languages that I was talking about. If you want to see the search in action, I'm going to just type Q. And you can see this cross-scenario versions, where you're getting basically all of the cards that contain Q either in the title or in the description. If you want to jump into the actual create, you can see this flying in from the right. This is a simple one, but you want to see a little bit more involved one. We can take a look at this one that's using a queue. So you can see that you can configure all the stuff that you need to configure, pretty similar to the way that you used to do it before. But we do believe that this is a lot more usable, a lot more accessible for you guys, and hopefully it's a welcome improvement. Here you can also see the filter for language and filter for scenario. One more thing to call out is if you're using, for example, an experimental language template, you can jump straight into the language by clicking on the language here. So you need to make a selection. However, you can also change the selection here. So you can jump into, you can change languages after the fact or from the selection screen itself. And cool thing to note is that we do continue to have this experimental warning, just to remind you guys that there's some stuff that is more of an experiment than production ready. That's always something to keep in mind. And as I said, this works for both the V1 version of the runtime as well as the V2 version of the runtime. The only difference is the templates that we have available and the languages that are supported. So I think that wraps it up for me, and it's back to you, Colby.
All right, so I think that I am not going to have sufficient time to go through the entire demo. I'm going to start, and if people have to tune out, that's totally fine. I've already given the very high-level explanation of what IoT Edge is. So what I'm going to do now is actually provision an IoT Edge device. I don't actually have a device with me, so I'm going to pretend to have a device. I'm going to use my laptop. So I'm going to simulate a device. I'm going to hook that up to the cloud. I'm going to show messages passing up to that from the device to the cloud. And then I'm going to deploy a function to that device and show the function reacting to those messages. So the scenario here is sort of similar to what I was talking about earlier. I'm going to make a device that is sending temperature readings. So the first thing we do is, so this is an IoT Hub. I have already provisioned this for time. It's my little demo IoT Hub. And we go down to IoT Edge. And as you can see, it's in preview. So we open up IoT Edge. And what we're going to do is add an IoT Edge device. So here I'm going to call it Functions Live Webcast. And it'll auto-generate some keys for me, and I'll click Save. So now it's deploying. This should only take a second. And then once I get the device, I will go and get a connection string. And what I'm going to do with that connection string is I'm going to bump back to this PowerShell. So for the sake of this demonstration, anything in this PowerShell is on the device itself. Anything not in PowerShell is me administering the device from the cloud. So there's this cool script, IoT Edge control. And that is basically everything you need to run this from the device itself. So this is a simple pip download. And I've already done that, but it's pretty straightforward. So IoT Edge control setup, and all I'm doing here is hooking up the device that I'm provisioning to the other, to the cloud. So connection string, and then if I bump back to the cloud, hopefully my device will be done. It is not yet done. So we have to wait on that for a second. But what happens is I will enter the connection string. I'll enter it in just a second, and then add this additional flag, auto search gen force no passwords. Cool. Let's hope the device is provisioned. Great. Here we are. Functions Live Webcast. We have this little device here. And I bump out and I get this connection string. So I copy here. I'm going to go back to the part where I should put it in, paste, and there we are. So what this is going to do now is it's saying this device, what this PowerShell is running, is going to connect up to the cloud, and it's saying this IoT Edge device is now connected to my PowerShell. So this will take just a second to start, and then what we're doing behind the scenes, this is using Docker, so it's basically pulling down a Docker image, and now I say IoT Edge control start. Okay, so now the runtime is starting. It's pulling down a Docker image from the IoT Hub, and it says runtime started. So now we say Docker PS, and here, there's our agent. So it created 6 seconds ago, just started, and now it's up. So now we go back to the cloud. Let's go back to the device. And so what's happening is it has no response yet because we haven't shown it. Now it has 417, which means the device has no configuration. Basically, it doesn't know what to do yet because I haven't actually done anything. So now I'm going to set a module. What I'm doing here, I'm going to add an IoT Edge module, and basically this is saying I'm going to deploy code down to my device. I'm going to call this temp sensor. And this is a Docker image that Microsoft has published that has a mock temperature sensor. So this is the URI of where that image lives. I'm going to save. And these are some more advanced settings that I don't need to touch for this simple example. I'm going to deploy. So now we go back to the device, and if we click refresh, it'll take a second because this is actually pushing down to the device. And we refresh, and there it is. So now we have the temp sensor. It is running on the device. So we go down to here, and let's say Docker PS again. And as you can see, it automatically updated. We now have these who have been updated, or who have been up for less time. And now let's actually see what's happening in those. So let's go here, Docker logs. So this is actually seeing what's happening inside this container. So it sent these 2 messages. So let's run that one more time. So now it sent a 3rd message. So these are the just little temperature readings that are sending up to the cloud. Now I'm going to bump back out to my Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is what I'm going to use for my local development because there are some really cool extensions that have been released for this. So what I'm actually going to do first is authenticate my IoT Hub with my Visual Studio Code. So to do that, I need my access key. So let's get the connection string here. So now I've copied the connection string, and I'm going to go into IoT Hub, and I am going to set IoT Hub connection string. So then I paste here and say, okay, so now the IoT Hub connection string is updated, and you see the device pops up here. So we have what we just did is we're saying, I am in Visual Studio Code monitoring the IoT Hub, which lets us do cool things like P, lets us do cool things like start monitoring device to cloud messages. So it's starting monitoring. This is from something else. So it creates these partitions. And then here, these are the devices that are being sent from my PowerShell up to the cloud. So that'll continue happening. I'm going to stop that for now. But you can see these devices are actually passing. So that's the first half of my demo. That's a really cool deployment of an Azure IoT Edge device. Now let's run a function on it. So we're right at time. So for those of you who want to see a function, stick around. But if you have to head out, no worries. What we're going to do is I've got this function here. So this is a pretty simple function. It's a template. It's got some custom classes. It's got some logic here. Basically, what's happening is the scenario I was talking about earlier. There's a temperature threshold, and we're checking if the message we get in, if the temperature in that message is above a certain threshold. If it is, we append this alert property to that message. So what we have to do now is first deploy this as a Docker image. So we've got a Docker file here that is building off of the functions runtime container, which I discussed is fully available. You can check it out. What we're going to do is we're going to build IoT Edge module. So we're just selecting this as the execution directory, and then I'm going to push this to my Docker Hub, called test, and then I'm naming it Functions Live Webcast. So what this is doing, it now opens up, it pushes to Docker Hub. It's already happened. Docker is really smart. I prepped this demo, so it happens incredibly quickly. So now what we do is we say, so now actually, sorry, this is what this actually did was this tagged the Docker image. Now we need to actually push it to the internet. So we're going to edge push IoT Hub module Docker image. We're going to push to the same place here, and now Docker is pushing. So layer already exists, and boom, it's up in the cloud. So now what we're going to do, you guessed it, deploy another module. Maybe you didn't guess it, but I guessed it. So now we've got our Functions Live Webcast device, and we're going to, again, set module. So now we have our temp sensor already running. Now we're going to add IoT Edge module. So it's going to be called filter function. And this is at /test functions live webcast. So this is, again, getting that Docker image from there. So we did that. Now, routes. So this is slightly more complicated. We need to append an additional route. Basically, this is just saying, instead of just going from the device to the cloud, we're putting this function in the middle. So there's a sensor to the filter, and then the filter to IoT Hub. So we're basically plopping the function right in the middle of the message passing. So then we click next. We don't need to touch the template, and then we submit. So now this is doing the same exact thing. It's deploying down to the device, which will happen automatically. I click refresh. In just a second, it'll pop up, and here we have our filter function. So we go down back to our PowerShell, which we remember is the device itself. And we click, we type Docker PS, and here's the function. So let's see what's happening in the temperature sensor. We've made all of these temperature sensing things. So
measurements.
Yes, measurements, temperature sensing things as they're known.
That's an industry lingo, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very technical. So this is actually what's happening in the functions runtime. So as you can see, it's saying, yes, I've successfully received these messages, and I am passing them on. Basically, it's saying that C# function edge hub trigger has executed. Now my terminal's yellow. I don't know why that's the case, but okay, cool. Yeah, so as you can see, the functions have executed. Let's actually prove that to you, though, and go back to my little monitoring tool I have in VS Code. So let's start monitoring device to cloud messages. And here are our old messages. And these messages, because it kind of just increments, will be above the temperature threshold of 25. So here we have that alert. So the same messages, I didn't touch anything about the temperature sensing module. it was sending the messages up to the cloud. Now that we put the function on it, any temperature above 25 has this additional message property. So that concludes my demo. Sorry, I kind of had to rush through that a little bit. I think it's a really cool example of how you can run custom logic really anywhere now with a containerized image of the function's runtime. And yeah, that wraps up our demo. Sorry for the technical difficulties. The next webcast is January 11th. So tune in then. I don't know who's presenting. Who knows? But
they'll do a better job than we did.
yeah, hopefully we'll have the regular pit crew back. And
Sorry, everyone.
it's okay, Hendo. We still love you. Yeah. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Azure Functions signing
Signing
off.
out.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye everyone. Thanks for tuning in.